The landlord should be asked to provide a plan of the property early on in the negotiations. The extent of the property to be leased will make reference to this plan, and it is important for it to be accurate. If the lease is for more than 7 years, then it will need to be land registry compliant. The land registry has guidance on what constitutes a suitable plan. The guidance, as usual, is available on its website. Generally, leases will either be a full repairing lease or a full internal repairing lease. A full repairing lease is where the tenant is responsible for the repair of the entire building, including the structural parts. An internal repairing lease is common in a multi-let building. The tenant will be responsible for the repair of everything within its demise, usually including non-structural walls and everything from the floor screed to the plaster on the ceiling. The landlord in this situation will retain responsibility for repairing the external and structural parts of the building, but will recover the cost of the repair of these through the service charge. Tenants need to realise that a covenant to repair includes an obligation to put into repair, and so unless the property is in a brilliant condition when the property is taken on, it is recommended that most tenants request that their repairing obligation is limited by way of a schedule of condition. A schedule of condition will evidence any disrepair in the building and will need to be agreed with the landlord. Where a schedule of condition has been agreed, the tenant will not be responsible for repairing anything within the schedule. For matters such as marked walls or broken handles, this is unlikely to lead to any problems. However, if the parts of the building to be demised to the tenant which are in disrepair are absolutely fundamental and necessary for a satisfactory occupation, the tenant should consider asking the landlord to make good these parts before the lease is taken on. For instance, if the roof leaks, the landlord should be asked to make it watertight. If the disrepair is just covered by the schedule, neither the landlord nor the tenant will have an obligation to repair it. The tenant could find itself having to make the repair just because it cannot continue to occupy without the problem being rectified. The cost of a schedule of condition is usually met by the tenant, who will usually also appoint the surveyor to carry out the inspection and prepare the schedule. However, practicalities may mean that the tenant itself takes the photos to show the disrepair. It will then agree the schedule with the landlord, and the schedule will be annexed to the lease. Even if there is not going to be a schedule of condition, tenants ought to consider obtaining a survey. They should investigate absolutely anything that might need the outlay of funds during the term. If the lease is just a short-term lease, say less than 7 years, then the charity should also consider asking that anything that would require capital expenditure is excluded from the service charge and tenant covenants. For instance, if the landlord replaces the air conditioning in the building at, say, the end of a 3-year lease, should the tenant pay for the replacement cost? I don't think so. They wouldn't receive any benefit, and so that sort of cost should really fall to the landlord.